And so the journey continues. We are back with another episode, and we have reached episode 9. And today we're going to delve into a topic that has everything to do with everyday life. if, if it makes sense, it will make sense. If it don't, it won't. Um, but today we're going to be speaking about failure and learning. And when you fail, what happens? Right? So, as we get into this topic, me for one, I don't believe that I fail. I believe that every every moment in life gives you an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think when we look at where we are at as a human race, we are in the age of information. And what do we do with all this information that's around us? Right? Because many times you can read something and you can feel like, wow, I'm such a failure. But who decided that that's the metric that we need to use? Because everything becomes habitual, essentially, right? So when you believe that you have failed and failed and failed, it will become such a habit that you will believe that you have failed all the time. But essentially, that's not really what's happening. And when you have the idea that you failed, you negate all learnings. And that brings me to this, that learning, on the other hand, is a very intentional kind of practice that we need to engage. And when we look at what we spoke about in a few episodes ago about reading, reading is one of the most important tools to learning, is because reading takes you out of your current state and it positions you in a focused state. Well, if you allow yourself to. But it takes you away from all kinds of flashing lights, social media, and all things that intrigue you to this space of wanting to sort of get this instant gratification and pleasure out of life. But reading really puts you into a space where I'm going to allow myself to study a topic and actually learn. So when we look about when we look at failing, right, and we hear about failing a lot in business and entrepreneurship and school. But when we understand that nothing is really a failure, right? But we have an opportunity to learn. So when you have done a business venture and it does not exceed the or harvest the results that you wanted it to harvest, does that mean you're a failure? Or have you learned certain things that you will not do again? Or have you learned certain things that you should be doing? And that's essentially what this thing of failure and learning is all about. When I look at school, for example, so I was one of the worst students in the entire world. I did not enjoy school as much as I enjoyed university. I did not enjoy school as much as I enjoyed sort of the practical work and work in the job. And I would I can sort of diagnose myself as a lazy student because I had no desire to learn. Like, oh, I wanted to learn, but I didn't want to put in any effort. And Did that make me a bad student? Potentially. But was there a reason for it? Maybe. And I think it's more a way of learning that I did not understand. So in school, you have this very strict way of learning, monotone methods of learning. But for example, I did not capture the lessons the way it was taught. And in that I struggled so much to learn. So much so that when I used to get an exam paper, I have no clue as to what is happening. It looks as if sometimes the questions I'm seeing it for the very first time. And I'd ask like my friends, yo, did you see this? Did we ever do this work in class? They're like, yeah, obviously we did it. That's why it's in the exam paper. So it's really interesting to think that this is the way we need to learn. And further on, I went to high school, and it did not get any better. But what happened there was certain things interested me, and it was such things as accounting and economics that we did in EMS at the time. It was, and these sort of things really intrigued me, and I wanted to learn more about it because obviously in school it's very basic, and then I really put in effort into those areas because I wanted to know, um, like what this is. And ever since grade 8, I think it was standard 6, I knew exactly that I wanted to study accounting. Went on to matric and lazy, struggled to learn. The methods were weird, but I got through by the grace of God. When I got to university, I saw a totally different way of learning. And what it taught me was that school teaches you to know certain things, while university teaches you to understand certain things. Because when you know something, it's just stored in your mind for a period of time. When you understand something, it means that you have kind of digested it and you have the ability to put it into a practical scenario, and that learning then becomes part of you essentially. So, like, it was crazy to understand this difference. And then going through university, I had to sort of, the way I studied was I had to break things apart and then put it back together. And that was the only way I knew how to learn. And I did not do very well in terms of grades because, again, when it came to the tests, I was like, what? What is actually happening right now? I don't understand. But in all of this, I understood that it is not so much as to me knowing something as it is for me to understand how much I don't know. And that really intrigued my learning to another level where I then began to develop this love for entrepreneurship and business and investing. And then I developed this understanding of everyone have the ability to build a level of wealth. So that is my learnings based on certain failures in my sort of junior school and high school. And when we look at failing in the sense of entrepreneurship and business, you can never fail backwards. You always fail forward, because when you fail and you fall, you essentially are not going to fall head back, because when you are moving and building towards something, you're always pushing forward. So when you fail forward. And when you get up, you are inherently further than where you actually fell. So I think when we understand this, that where you failed, right, you're at a certain place. But when you get up, you're always further ahead than the point that you actually failed. And when we look at failing and growing, right, growth is probably the seed, or failing is probably the seed for your growth. But we need to understand that when you grow, you need to get up from your failure. So it's the sense of resilience that you really need to say, I failed, yes, but there's still a goal that needs to be accomplished. There's still a goal in front of me that I need to move towards. And it's important to overcome failures, right? Because your failures don't remain unless you decide for it to remain. Because after your failure, there's a reward, and the reward is that you actually get up and move towards where you are actually wanting to go. So we don't really fail if we think about this thing, but we actually just learn, and we actually just grow. And I think what I decided in my life earlier on is that I want to take as much risks as possible, so that if I fail, or when I fail while I'm young. I fail while I have almost nothing. Well, I fail where I have little and not too much responsibility, because I understood that failing will lead me to a plethora of learnings, so that when I enter into something at the later stage, I take all these learnings with me, and then what I'm building will be sustainable in a shorter space of time than I would previously. However, I also believe that when you fail and you have the right people around you, your failure is merely just a mist in the air. But when you fail in community, you don't fail an inch, because community is about progression. And when you do have this sense of failure, you are still progressing to the next, you are still moving forward, right? And I think it's important to allow yourself the accountability, and embracing the accountability, and taking that responsibility of that. If you fall short here, I might be confronted by accountability, but accountability is not meant to diminish me, but it's meant to appreciate me, meaning it's meant to increase me and not decrease me. So we need to understand this thing, that especially our generation, that we, for myself, I don't like failing. There was one time in my life where I was busy with my BTech, it was, and I was working and studying. And my major, I failed in the first year. So because I did it over 2 years. It was part time, working and studying. I was allowed 2 years. I broke up my modules. I think it was about 8 modules I had to do for the course, my BTech, and I did four year one and four year two. But in year two, I had to do five because I had failed my major. And this thing hit me hard, because I never really failed a subject before that. And now this thing comes, and I'm like, how did I even fail this thing? It's supposed to be my major, it's supposed to be something that I like, something that I'm good at. How can I even? And mind you, this is the subject that I really put in effort into. I put probably most of my time into the subject, but I still end up not succeeding or not doing as well as I supposed to. But as we understand, we don't really fail, but we learn. And I learned that my efforts might not have been to the level that it's supposed to be. And I then had to pick myself up and do it again. And I did it again. And guess what? I passed. I succeeded. So failure does not last forever. Failure is just a mere mist in the air that lasts for a moment, but you can always pick yourself up and move on and do it again because the amount of learning you will gain will supersede you in the space that you have once felt before. So thank you for your time today. And I'm Andrew James Stewart, and this is Dee-Boor. We will see you on the next episode in 1 week's time. I'm living my dream, and I hope you decide to live your dream too.